Next up is Brent Gorda from Intel with our third founder story of the day. Brent Gorda was the founder of Whamcloud and is now in the Intel family. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, experienced international technical executive with an ability to grow and foster exceptional working environments, and founded and created an environment of trust and employee loyalty, and has a successful track record of selling off several startups. He's held various positions ranging from manager, project lead, to president and CEO. He's a key member of two significant changes in HPC architectures. In the early 90s, he worked on the shift from vector to parallel computing. Or you can use a VGA option. So the first shift was early 90s, the shift from vector to parallel computing, and in the early 2000s, key in the efforts with IBM on the Blue Gene architecture, which was the world's fastest system several years ago. A deep technical knowledge of system architectures on the hardware and software side, and a long-time participant in the industry. He was recently elected to the steering committee for the Supercomputing Conference Series. And his entrepreneurial activities include numerous executive leadership positions. So we look forward to his founder story.
Thank you. I look forward to being able to log in.
Taps on the red USB as well. You have to put this on USB.
You do?
Yeah, it needs power. And it should go from back there. You're on your way. Taps on it. There you go. There you go.
Okay. Well, I asked Dan to stay because he's really good at heckling, and I think we need a little bit more interaction here. I don't actually know what I'm going to say. The preparation for this was hilarious because reminiscing and going through some of the stuff we did over the past 5 years got me just kind of sitting there in stunned silence. The 1-minute version of the story is I had an idea to start a company in April of 2010. I started it on Friday, July 16th, 2010. And on Friday, the 13th of July, 2012, one business day before our second anniversary, Intel bought us. That was after, what was that? That was July, so that was 7 months of negotiation, which was pure frickin' hell in my mind. It was hard. We started with one employee. In fact, the start on 7/16/10, I got permission from the director of the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory to leave at noon on Friday. I went to a meeting with a vendor at 4 p.m. full of Livermore people. There were a dozen people there. I was running what was the TLCC procurement. It was $55 million worth of x86 procurement. And I started out the meeting by saying, gentlemen, I have to warn you that this is my last meeting. I'm resigning and I'll be leaving in 1 hour. If you don't want me here for this meeting, please let me know and I'll leave. And the Livermore guys dropped out of their chairs. Holy, what are you doing? And the vendor said, where are you going? I just explained it to them and they said, no, please stay, this is good, and handed off the meeting there. So I was the first guy on that Friday. By the time we were acquired, we were 70-ish people, and we were 100% virtual. We had 70 people in 72 offices, which when we were acquired by Intel was crazy because they'd never acquired a virtual company and they want an address for an office at the university. So for the next 6 months, when you went to the employee data or into the database to hire someone and pulled down on location, all 70 of our home addresses showed up. They had to make every one of them an Intel office to ingest us into Intel. So my background is mostly technical. I have founded 3 companies, and one of my first jobs at Mirius was working for another startup, which was scientific high-performance parallel computing. I started the student cluster competition. If you go to the show floor, this is an event that I think has just been wildly successful. There's, 50 or 60 kids there. each year I get to go down and cherry pick the kids and, you know, which ones do I want for interns and which ones do I want to hire. It's a great fountain of talent for this community. So I'm really happy about that. The fellow that introduced me talked about Livermore, the attack of the killer micros. I actually went to Berkeley for a few years and ran a group called the Future Technologies Group, and Phil worked for me at Berkeley, not Livermore, Berkeley. So we go back a long ways there. So 2 years, very, very quick. Had I known then what I know now, things would have been a hell of a lot different, but that's what it means to learn, right? So in April of 2010, I went to the Lustre user group meeting to hear the vendor that owned Lustre stand up and say, this Lustre stuff's pretty cool, but we don't like this open source community thing. We're gonna shut it all down and you can buy it on our hardware if you want it. And the guy, literally the guy beside me leaned over and said, somebody ought to do something about that. And I'm just a complete sucker for that kind of crap. And I'm like, damn it, I'm gonna do something about that. So there was a huge flurry of activity and everybody's gonna go, you know, catch the football that's sprouting into the air. I went out and methodically worked my Rolodex, which turns out to be quite substantial in hindsight, and raised money, aligned with the community groups, and ended up coming out in July saying, I think I can do this. The press was pretty funny. My startup office was a UPS box in Danville, California that measured about 3 inches by 4 inches by 16 inches. And the press said in upscale Danville, California, that just happened to be that UPS box was closer to me than the town I lived in by a couple miles. The number of people that would call me up and say, we want to meet in your Danville office was just hilarious. It turned out to be Pete that we did that. Inside HPC, that was Rich that was here earlier. The guy that I really want to dig at here is Addison Snell, and you're going to find his name a few times. Peter's already laughing. Addison Snell does, or I guess he still does, this radio broadcast. And I was sitting in my office a couple weeks after, my home office of course, a couple weeks after we started, and just surfing around while my 2 other founders were there, and I ran across this thing that said Whamcloud, and I'm like, oh wow, the web's starting to pick us up, let's listen to this. And effectively it was Addison Snell going, why do these guys think their crap doesn't stink? Who elected them king, and what do these vendors think of, you know, what do these users of Lustre think of all that? Which was just completely perfect for us, because it set the stage. Within the first couple of months, we signed them all up. In fact, there's a $1 bill there from IU. I got a call from IU, and these guys said, do you have any customers yet? And I'm like, why are you asking? Don't sign anything until we get you a contract. We want to be the first. My network of associates in the DOE and in the scientific computing area were so strong that people were vying to be the first customer to say that they were supporting us first. Livermore further helped by giving us time on a rather large cluster, an 1,100 node cluster called Hyperion, which we still use today. So a couple notes that I made here along the way. I think it was Dan that talked about the legalities thing. In order to hire these people all over the world, I started a company in the US, I started a company in the UK, I serviced North America, serviced as in had employees out of the US and Canada, and in Europe all the employees were in the UK office. I had to start a WFI in China, wholly owned foreign entity in China. That turns out to be quite hard, like verging on impossible hard. So I called a consultant up to get his help to do that. And he took a look at us and he said, I have the perfect answer. The Cayman Islands, we're gonna do blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Think of all the tax you can avoid. All of these things he was telling me. And I'm thinking, I'm servicing the US federal government and you're trying to get me to do an offshore tax evasion type of thing? No chance. So he hit the curve pretty darn quick. The legalities turn out to be quite important. Especially if you're doing software and services, there's some legalities around revenue recognition which you should be keenly aware of. If you're not, it's critical. We turned out to be profitable within 4 months, 6 months of starting up. I took $10 million in money, and yes, it was handed out by the month. By the time we hit month 10, they cut off the taps because we didn't need the money. based on cash flow, not based on revenue, right? We moved into Intel, and we're teaching Intel, subgroups in Intel, what software revenue recognition means. It's critical, and most people don't get it. You get a check from the customer, that's not your money. If you're doing software and services, you get that money, you get to prorate it every quarter or every month, depending on how you do your accounting. It's critical that you don't think you just booked a sale and that's cash in the bank and you can spend it, because that's not the way it works. I had absolutely the best staff you could possibly imagine. Internally, I don't think of myself as having a big ego, so I don't jump in and say, I own this, I got this. I trust in my staff. I hire the people that do the best job, and I let them do their job. I treat them as equals. Part of my hiring criteria, when I was able to hire face-to-face, I would tell them, look, one of my hiring criteria is a healthy disdain for management. If you are putting me up on a pedestal because I'm the CEO, I don't want you working here. I want you to treat me as an equal. I'm capable of screwing it up and doing bad stuff. The onus is on you to point it out, not to think somehow magically I know the answers here. We also had one rule. Big companies can have a good number of rules, but small companies, one rule. Our rule, and I challenge you to talk to anybody from Whamcloud, our one rule is you must wear pants. And we got lots of laughs and lots of jokes about that. The Chinese guys didn't get it at all. But in North American culture, wearing the pants in the family means you own the problem. If you see the problem, you own it. You call it out, you make sure somebody else knows about it. If you get me some beers, I'll tell you where it came from. It was actually kind of fun too. But I don't want to run out of time here. So we created an entirely virtual team with an incredible culture and a can-do attitude. I was online 24/7 with my cell phone, by my bed, the whole bit during the startup. We ran as fast as we possibly could, and we had the right people in the right position that just made all the difference. By the time we got to SC10 in New Orleans, I'm on the steering committee. I did the student cluster event. I went to all the SC meetings. So we started in, July of 2010. SC10 was done and locked down by then. I show up at the meeting in October, which is 1 month out, and the guys that do space planning came up to me and said, we just had somebody back out of a booth that's in a perfect location. You need to take it for Whamcloud. And I thought for about 5 seconds, and I said yes. I made a phone call to the gal sitting here, Jennifer, and she went out and got a booth made, all of the printed materials, and showed up 2 weeks later to be able to go to SC. Given that I thought this was recorded, I hid the face of the person in the lower right, but we had these nice little t-shirts that said Choose Luster, playing on the name Wham. The band Wham had a Choose Life shirt. So everybody's running around with Choose Luster shirts. It was viral to the point that directors of national laboratories were running around with these t-shirts on it. It worked great. The other picture I didn't have to blank out because you can't see who the hell they are anyway, but it was in New Orleans, and there was this place you could go to and play air guitar and so on. This is actually the general chair for SC, what was it? It was a general chair for an SC. They started up a band called the Whamclouds and sent this to me thinking it was funny. It was hilarious. Treating our employees well. Every one of my employees got this card, which is a little bit bad font, but basically I sent everybody our first dollar so that each employee had a card saying, thank you so much for making this happen, signed by myself and Eric Barton. Looks like I might have that slide in twice. No, it's just that. We come out of 2010. We're 6 months old at this point. Now Rich Bruckner's saying, we think Whamcloud's the ones to watch. Same thing out of TAC, effectively. I got 20 minutes, right? So I need to be. We go into 2011, and Oracle says we're no longer developing on the Lustre tree. We had to immediately react and say, we're the obvious place to take over the releases. We're going to start doing releases for the community. So in the first year, we opened an office in Boulder. We opened an office in Beijing. I lost a hire on a flight from Beijing. I was literally getting onto the flight, and my cell phone rang. And someone called us and said, I've signed your offer, but I've decided not to take it because I talked with someone else and they said you can't get my immigration status because you're too small of a company. And so he said, I'm rescinding and I accepted the other one, and I was on the flight, and I couldn't talk to him for 12 hours or something, and it was over at the point that was done. That was a big mistake on his part, not only financially, but the others that we were working on paperwork for came in on time, ahead of time, compared to what his had done. So it was kind of a year of restoration for the technology. The interesting observation for me, I'm a cyclist, and so you get a lot of endurance from doing cycling. You can go for 100 miles, that sort of thing. As we started to win, I wanted to go longer. So it felt like I was doing 100-mile days, and it felt like I wanted to do 200-mile days, because it was clicking, it was just working. It's this virtual cycle where the more customers come to you, the more customers want to come to you. The better you treat your staff, the harder they want to work. We'd have these crunch development situations where these guys would literally work for 3 days straight, and I'd FedEx them an iPad, because iPads were new then and they were sexy and cool. And the reaction out of these guys was, I don't ever want to go back to sleep. I want to keep working. You guys are treating me well. You're doing the right thing. It was awesome. ISC 2011 in Hamburg. Not much to mention here. 2012 is going to be much more interesting. But the thing out of Hamburg is our good friend Addison Snell decided that Luster was the winner at that event. So we're 11 months old at this point, and they're saying there's a serious turnaround in this technology. Everybody loves it. Everybody's using it. Today's Top 100 came out, and we've gone from 6 out of the top 10 to 9 out of the top 10 using the technology, not necessarily using Intel's version, but using the technology. So we show up in Seattle with a much more polished look. Many of you probably recognize the purple jacket on the right. That's Eric Barton, who is my CTO. He's here now with a brighter red jacket and a mohawk. He's the kind of guy that can pull that off. So if you see him around, he does it well. Our friend Addison Snell again. This was maybe the end of 2011. He's starting to become a fan now. And so we're doing a lot, meeting him in the field. The sales group for Whamcloud was me. I put on about 600,000 miles in the past 5 years. I visited every HPC company that would let me in, many in China, for example. You go to China and they've got these big machines and they want to show them off. So I did a huge amount of travel. I had a 1.5-year-old kid when I started this, so a little bit of risk-taking involved here, but I was that dedicated. If you've ever heard of the Luster technology, you'll have heard that it's sometimes a bit difficult to work with. And so one of the first things I put out was, we have to make this simpler to work with, or we're never going to grow the user community. So we started working on something called Chroma. Intel made us change the name to Intel Manager for Luster, because they like functional names. So we show up at, I think it was IC 2011 with Chroma, and we're starting to show graphs that tell you what's going on in your system. This is an early graph. The later ones are much nicer, and you can actually debug what's going on in your shared resource there. Gotta love the register's headline on this. Whamcloud flogs wild Luster pig into obedience with big. We were all smiles about that one. That was incredible. Okay, so in January I started talking to Intel about an acquisition. And I had, let's see, well, that story's probably not that important. We get to ISC 2012 in Hamburg, and we're going to announce any day. We're staging an announcement at Hamburg. We haven't signed, we haven't signed, we haven't signed. On one day of that week, and I don't remember which one it was, I went into a meeting with Addison Snell, and I've got Eric Barton with me, and they know that we're negotiating, right? They know that the end is near, that this is going to turn into something. Addison Snell looks me in the eye and he says, there's rumors around here that you guys are going to be acquired. Robert Reed and Eric Barton both go like this. And I'm like, oh crap. Now I've been called out on the spot, right? And Addison Snell, I said, well, who do you think it's going to be, Addison? Well, I think it's going to be HP. I said, well, why not DDN? Why not one of the storage companies? Why is it going to be? And so I dragged a red herring across the trail, got my butt out of there, walked to my hotel, had a company-wide meeting announcing that we were being acquired by Intel, and I was allowed to talk to the staff about it.
So
Literally back-to-back meetings, a 5-minute walk in between. That's hard to do. That's really hard to do. Yes, sir?
You know that you're just making Addison's ego even larger. I mean, he already is the ego that walks like a man.
Yeah.
Your slides are just gonna make it.
Well, I may need him in a future life, come on. I may need him in a future life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So at the same time, we were negotiating with the Department of Energy over what turned out to be the Fast Forward project. The DOE led an RFI that said, or an RFP that said, we want to figure out what comes after POSIX. So we got Barton, the big brain there, and we come up with this whole DAOS work, scalable object, synchronous, database kind of compliant storage system. And we win that. We win that at the end of June. Legally, we can't tell anybody that we're being acquired, right? We told the employees it's all under NDA. We win this, and within a week or two, we announced that we were acquired, and the DOE just came down on me like a ton of bricks. You should have told us. Came down on Intel like a ton of bricks. There was just no way to tell them that that was going on, because it started in January. Who knows how long it takes? If you really want to hear some pain and suffering, get me with a beer and talk about 6 months of due diligence. Because every month you start over because your financials have changed. Record keeping is absolutely critical. Here's all our contracts. No, wait, here's one more. Oh, here's one over here. Not good things, not good things that have happened while you're. So we were acquired, wrote this nice note to the community, asserted that at Intel, we were going to be the same group doing the same thing. It's now 3.5 years later. We are the same group doing the same thing. I was just promoted yesterday. I run HPC storage at Intel now, so the Luster Group and many of the hardware aspects of that. The celebration was fun. The Whamcloud, the Mirius company that I worked for in the 80s in Edmonton gave us each a bottle of champagne with a nice little saying on it, effectively saying, for the occasion of our first system ship, we're giving everybody a bottle. I saved that bottle. I don't know why, but I saved it. When we had the party, I opened it. It tasted like crap, but I had saved it for 20-some years. I gathered the management team at my house. All of the women got a Gucci purse. All of the men got a nice wallet. Everybody got a little gold keychain that was, I don't know, several $100s worth of gold in it. It's a solid gold keychain. All of us carry them around kind of as a memento. This is the team. This was the very first time they were all together. Remember, I mentioned that we were entirely virtual. It took me until after we were negotiating with Intel to when I finally met face-to-face everyone that I had hired. And I personally hired everyone. I would do interviews over Skype. I would do interviews over the phone. Sometimes people's English was about as good as my Chinese, and we would type back and forth to get things going. It was a wild and crazy kind of time. This is our first day at Intel. You'll notice we gathered a bunch of t-shirts along the way. T-shirts for tech conferences go over really, really well. Always buy the highest quality you can, otherwise it's used to wash the car. You buy a really high quality shirt and it's got Choose Luster on it, I bet you $1 you'll see some at this event. They're collector's items. We have, some of our customers have framed them and put them on their walls. They're that much of a collector's item.
Brent, who is in the middle?
Who's it, what's that?
Who is in the middle there?
Jessica. So
Jessica, okay.
I was just promoted to run the business side, and Jessica stood up to run the technical side of the business. Interesting story about her. I mentioned the healthy disdain for management. When I called her up to interview her, she didn't know me, of course, right? I was the customer at that time, and I would be, you guys get this shit done, you get it done now. And so I was a bit intimidating, and when I called her up, she said, you know, I just got to tell you, I got a bit of a reputation for not agreeing with everything all the time. And I told her I wouldn't hire you if you agreed with me. One of us is redundant if you agree with me. I'm hiring you because you have a different point of view, and you can make stuff happen. And she is. She's now leading a group of 80 or so people. We've grown to 80 plus a dozen sales and so on. So we're pushing 100 people there now. I have one report now versus the 70 or so I had when we were at Whamcloud. I got a whole list of other stories. I don't know what to. I was very impressed by Leo's talk, by the way. For a young guy, you really got a lot of experience there.
I'm not that young anymore, but thanks.
You started dyeing your hair white, didn't you? The mentor thing can't be, absolutely get a mentor. I never had a mentor. I brute forced this. I way overdid it. I would not be able to put that kind of energy into it again. I wouldn't put that much energy into it again. But something magical happens when you succeed. Everybody thinks you're smarter than you were before. And you also put up one that said success is a bad tutor because you don't learn anything from it, right? I'm no smarter now than I was before. I have a little bit wider of a Rolodex. I know a little bit more about my skills, but I'm brave enough to go do something again because I know how to do some of these things. The do it acronym here is really worth taking to heart. You gotta just go do it. That's all I got. If anybody wants to ask questions, embarrassing or otherwise. Sir?
First, it's really inspiring to see how fast you did from the first thing to acquisition. But one thing I was curious about is that when you take the 10 million upfront, right, it comes with an extraordinary amount of control provisions on the other side.
Yep.
And you yourself showed that how you could you got to customers so rapidly that you didn't need the 10 million.
I was an idiot. I shouldn't have taken it.
So
I could have done it bootstrapped.
Yeah,
I
so
just
that's-
didn't have the confidence, and I took 10% of that money in the end, and I gave up all the equity.
So the trade-off there is that, look how fast you did it, and would you have been able to do it as fast? I took the other route. I've been at it for 23 years. So the question was, I've taken total 40K over the whole time, right? So the question would be is if you go after something and you take, you bootstrap, focus on customers, validate, and then go get your money, right? Obviously, you own most of it. But if you do it, or your team, right? But if you do it the traditional way, you'll get fired, and then, when the CTO will be like gone, and, right? So what's the middle thing?
So first off, I had more magic bullets than I ever thought I did. I could call up directors of the DOE labs and get an audience and go in and say, this is critically important for you to support. Not many people can do that. I came out of the DOE, and the people that I were calling on day one were my peers before. I worked on the exascale program, programming models for the DOE, all that. I just had such a deep Rolodex of people that turned out to like me enough and trust me enough, the whole credibility thing, right? I'd call someone up and say, you gotta support this, and many of them would say, okay, I'm on board, I trust you, I'm gonna go do this for you. So I had a lot of magic bullets there. One of the things, I had this write-up that Cindy did, this interview. You gotta have that Rolodex. If you're coming in and not knowing anybody, it's really hard to get them to answer the phone. Every one of these labs has a future technologies group, whether they call it that or not. Jeff Vedder at Lannel, Eric Strohmeyer at Berkeley. You gotta befriend these guys and you gotta go get their input. And you're not selling them day one. You're interacting with them and you're friending them and you're finding out, are they gonna be interested? The people thing just cannot be overstated. I joined Pete Ungaro, the CEO of Cray, told me to join this CEO club. And I joined it, and what you learn is it's all communications. Every single bit of this is communications. Communications to your staff to get them all on the same page, communications to your customers to get them, communications with the press, all of that, it's all about communications. A hard thing to do if you're not good at it. I took the Myers-Briggs thing, Any guesses as introvert, extrovert? I'm a perfect 30 out of 30 on the introvert scale. Introvert. I'm a perfect introvert. So I can stand up here and calmly talk about the experience. I don't know. You have to force yourself to do that. I've given so many hundreds of talks in the past 5 years, there's no way to count in more countries than, yes, Dan?
But isn't it way different being an introvert and talking about something that's your baby? Because I always found this.
It is, absolutely. It is very much like having a baby. It's a one-way committal that you're not going to give up on no matter what, right? Everybody else goes home for the weekend and you're trying to figure out how to keep that baby safe, how to keep it going. We got lucky and had some early success and that just steamrolled, which is why it was a 2-year type of thing. But that's part of what you learn as you go through this a couple of times. You learn how much TLC it takes and when to give it to somebody else. I did every sales call myself. Now I've got salespeople doing the sales call. Their hit ratio is way down from where mine was. But that's fine, because there's 6 of them and they're out living on airplanes and doing the whole show, right? I don't need to do that anymore. Yes, ma'am.
How did you find Intel, or did they find you? How did it start?
Is that camera still rolling?
We'll edit it out.
So I knew many of the people at Intel because they were selling to me when I was at Livermore, and so I knew who to call. I just didn't know how much they liked Lustre or didn't like Lustre. And the guy that I called turned out to be a GPFS fan. And it turned out that I nagged him a little bit too much, and he just went silent on me. And then magically one of the VCs called. And a lot of that, I think, is the press that we got. And a lot of that may be that Intel kicked x86 to the curb a year or two later. And Intel, they realized that without a parallel file system, these big machines would be held hostage by GPFS as a file system, and that would give IBM an entree to start selling power. And so they saw Lustre as a critical technology that they wanted to save. We had other suitors that were more in the enterprise business, the big search engine business, for example, that were talking to us, and it turned out we got a little bit of a bidding war going on, which benefits everybody on the sell side, gets to win when the price goes up. It got real hot, real harried, really complicated. For the 6 months that we were negotiating, I actually slept in my kids' room, and the kids slept with mom, because I was up every 10 minutes. I was up doing stuff, and I was just no one you'd want to be around with while doing my day job. It's that hard. Yes, Leo.
I just wanted to, I'm a big fan of virtual technical teams, by the way, and I did it for like a decade. Because we just didn't have money for an office, and we were distributed, you know, it was the lost decade and so forth. But the pendulum seems to have swung the other way now, where everyone's talking about, you know, all these types of workspaces and so forth, and there seems to be kind of a, in the 2000s it was sexy to be virtual because it was cheap and, you know, whatever, and now it's like, okay, get back together in a room. Where do you stand on that? I mean, obviously you did what you did and it worked, but today, where do you stand on that?
The rules are pretty simple by me. If you're 100% virtual, everybody's got the same equal advantage to the information. If, like us, you are 100 people that are virtual in a company of 100,000, it's a big disadvantage.
Right.
So you're either all that or you're all that. You don't want to be in between. Right now, we're having trouble with communications that we're struggling to be appropriately embedded inside Intel.
You guys still distributed?
We've tried to hire people inside Intel at offices, but you're not moving somebody out of Guangzhou, China, or Moscow to an Intel office, so we're mostly distributed. I meant to give this out to the best question. Who had the best question? Can't throw that far, Dan, sorry.
Thank you, Brent. Thanks.